So Sean, where do you perform nowadays?
Well, now, there's several festivals of the folk music around Ireland. There's a great big one, and this brings me to a story, a great big one down in Cork in July. It's the great festival of all the folk singers of Ireland. And I have a story attached to that now. It was last year. It was in April. Now, I was in Limerick there, and I was walking along a street. I had a little bit of business to do about the farm. And I was walking down the street, and I looked over the road, and there was a man I knew. Now, he was a man I used to go to school with. It was called Tim Flannelly, his name was. And I called over the road to him, Tim. See, and he didn't notice me. Now, the thing is about Tim Flannelly, I knew this, he was running at that time the Festival of All Ireland Folk Singers down in Cork, you see. I knew that. So I called over to him. And it was a busy day, and he didn't notice me. He was obviously deep in thought about his own business, you see. He was walking along the road. I gave him another shout, and he walked on. And I crossed over the road, and I stopped him. And I said, Tim, it's Sean. And he said, well, he said. He was very pleased to see me. And we began to talk about the old times, you know, and I told him about the farm and the cows and that sort of thing. And I congratulated him on what he was doing. And we talked of this and that. And the thing was, and this made me chuckle a little bit to myself, he never once mentioned the Festival of All Ireland Folk Singers. Now, he knew well enough that I was in that line of business myself, you see. And I could see that he was just having a bit of a joke with me. And we talked about this and that. And all the time I could read between the lines there, you see. And then he had to rush off. As I say, he had an urgent important appointment. So after a minute or two of talking, he was on his way. But I knew what was going on. And that evening I got home and I was there in the kitchen, and Mary was preparing a little bit of food for me. She could see I was smiling to myself. She said, what is it? What is it, Sean? And I said, you never know who I met in Limerick today. And she said, who's that? And I said, it's Tim Flannelly. Ah, she said. I told her who Tim Flannelly was. And I said, the thing is, I know what I'm going to be doing in July. And she said, what's that? Well, the 14th of July you'll find me down outside Cork at the Festival of the All Ireland Folk Singers. And sure, I got an invitation. She said, he actually asked you, said he, Sean? She said, Mary. And I said, I didn't need to be asked, I could see. He was having a joke with me. So, next month, on the 14th of July, I took a train down to Cork, and I got to the festival. It was a glorious place. It was full of people. It was packed full of people there. And I went to the main gate there, and I said who I was. And they looked on the list, see, and they said, there's a man there. He was a very nice man, but he looked on his list, you see, and he said, I can't see Sean. Oh, Sean, see. And I said, one of the performers. And I looked through the gate there, and there was Tim Flannelly there walking along. And I called out to him. I said, Tim, it's me, it's Sean. Oh. And but he was in a hurry or something. He didn't hear me, and he disappeared into the crowd. And I didn't actually have the money on me at that time there to get a ticket. I would have got a ticket and gone on, and then I would have gone and found him, and I would have performed, you see. But I didn't actually have the money on me as such. And so I went a little way away, and I had a little stall selling some tea and a coffee, and I had a cup of tea and a little bun, I think, and I waited there. And I could hear the singing going on there of the people and the applause and everything. And I waited there, must have been about 5-6 hours. And it was obviously nearing the end there, and people were just going in there without having to pay. So I did that. I thought that probably he'd want me to go on at the end anyway, you see. So I went in there with the rest, and I was surprised. A lot of people were leaving there then. And the sort of area in which the stage there was getting quite deserted there, and I was hanging around round the stage there trying to catch a glimpse of Tim, you see, and didn't know what was going on, and the band there was on the thing. They were dismantling the things and taking away the loudspeakers and everything, and the crowd was on their way out. It was quite an exodus, as it were. But anyway, when the band who was playing left the stage, I walked on, and I thought I'd just go on and have a song there, and at least they would have seen me. But it was an empty field there I was facing, you see. But I thought, obviously Tim would be very upset if he knew this was happening, and I didn't know quite what to do. And suddenly, across the field came running a man. He was a little man in a brown suit, and he ran up to the stage, and he says, Jesus, he says, am I late? He said, I was involved in a terrible catastrophe with the trains and everything, and I got myself late. He says, if I reach the end of the thing, is there anyone going to be performing? And I said to him, well, they've all seemed to have gone. He said, Jesus, he said, yeah, the thing was, his name was Michael Flynn. And he told me, he was sitting there, that his wife was terribly ill. And he'd been nursing her for about 4 or 5 days since then, you see. And she'd insisted that he had a break and come down to see the singing. And he didn't want to go, but she finally convinced him, and he'd got down, and he'd rushed down there, and there was no one there. And he said, well, Jesus, he says, I've wasted my time. He said, but if you don't mind, he says, I said to him, I'll give you a song. He said, was that true? He said, will you do that for me? He said, I will. He said, I think it. He sat down there, and I gave him a song. It's a beautiful song that I wrote about the cows on the North Field, about what it was like to be among them in the evening. And I sang it to him, and he stood there in the empty field listening to me in his brown suit. I'll never forget it. And at the end of it, he looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. Tears in his eyes. And without a word, he turned and walked away from me and across the field and out the gate at the end. And I've never seen him again. But there's an end to that story, you see. I don't know where it is. I don't think it's here at all. I must have mislaid it, but about a month afterwards I got a postcard from him. And his wife was improving, he said, which was a grand thing. And he thanked me for having sung and taken the trouble to sing to him that day. And I'll never forget that. And that's my experience of the All Ireland Folk Singers Festival.